Hello, BookTube. I mentioned yesterday the Pentathon, the easiest flippin' read-a-thon that you've ever heard of, created by Matt at Paperback Junkie, to celebrate the fact that September has 5 weekends, or at least the beginning of 5 weekends. And he came up with 5 very easy prompts for just the kind of pulpy paperback stuff that he loves to read, and that really, don't we all love to read it? If you've read it, aren't you willing to admit, at least in the confines of this read-a-thon, that you really kind of liked it, that it really did work? And if you've never read it, you're missing out. You're missing out on a banquet. It's a banquet consisting entirely of chocolate chip cookies and Cheetos. It's junk food, but that's still really good. And I thought I listed my responses to these prompts yesterday. The prompts are: first week is to read something by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Second week is to read something by H.P. Lovecraft, though you're unworthy. And then the third prompt was to read something by Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan. The fourth prompt is to read something hard-boiled, a hard-boiled noir detective story of some kind. And then the fifth one is to read a comic book. And I made my video yesterday, and then I realized this morning that I should do a follow-up about the first week, because next week we'll be off to the races with H.P. Lovecraft. So I wanted to give you a little update. I said yesterday that I would reread The Son of Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs with our blonde bohunk on the cover, and I did. I reread it just delightfully last night, and it's the story of young Korak, he's the son of Lord Greystoke of Tarzan, who, improbably enough, manages to have something of the same upbringing. He's a well-brought-up young boy until he falls in with an ape, a coot, who introduces him to the world that his father knew of wild animals, of the jungle, of the mangani, a kind of wild ape that, of course, is not a gorilla. That is a mistake that too many people make when it comes to the Tarzan world, including too many movie producers. The mangani, the apes that raise Tarzan, are not gorillas. They have a culture. They have a language. They have religious rituals. They're more man-like. That's the fantasy element of Tarzan takes off right from the beginning with that. But anyway, Korak is introduced to that world and grows up in that world and comes to be known in that world as Korak the Killer. But the amazing thing in The Son of Tarzan is that there's a young woman named Miriam who also grows up in that world. She also is introduced to that world, separate from Korak for a long time. A tall, black-haired, commanding presence in that world, who she knows only as Bwana. It's pretty obvious to the reader from an early point that is Tarzan. He introduces her. And eventually, she becomes as accustomed to that world as Tarzan or Korak. Able to... And there's one scene in the book where she's been captured, and her captors have thought nothing of watching her. She's a young woman. So they put her on a horse, just in a horse train going through the jungle. They don't think anything of it. And at one point, when her horse takes her under a branch that's low enough, she just reaches up her arm and catapults herself up into the trees and is gone. Only because no one ever thought not to take that precaution. It was unthinkable. And it wasn't just unthinkable to her captors. I want to stress that was almost unprecedented in pulpy fiction before now. There were hardly, if you look all around, there are hardly as many examples of something like that as you would think. In the Conan stories, there's Belit, the pirate queen of the Black Coast, who is capable. She's a leader of men. She's convinced them that she's a goddess, but she's handy with a sword in the Conan stories. And in John Carter of Mars, there's Dejah Thoris, the incomparable Dejah Thoris, who mostly exists to be rescued. And there are a couple of other, Lana of Gathol, or a couple of other, Thuvia, Maid of Mars. They get the titles of their books, but their books are mostly about the young sword-wielding bravos who fight for their favor in very chivalric terms. But in this book, no spotlight is thrown on Miriam. it's just, she is a remarkable character. She is the as close as Edgar Rice Burroughs ever comes to a female version of these jungle-raised characters. And there's one scene late in the book. She has a suitor, the Honorable Morrison Baines, a typical lily-livered city folk, although Edgar Rice Burroughs gives him some wonderful moments. Like I mentioned yesterday, most of the characters in this book, even the loathsome villain, the Sheik, most of the characters in this book have some kind of redeeming quality, some kind of counterbalancing effect. And same thing is true with the Honorable Morrison Baines. But you can tell that Burroughs doesn't really esteem him because he never refers to him other than the Honorable. He always includes the Honorable, and it's clearly mocking. It's clearly mocking, and it's also helps to get your word count up. If you're pounding away on your typewriter and you need a certain word count by a certain time, it helps to but anyway, there's one scene, it's late in the book, and he's talking to Miriam. He has seen her. He has seen a sight that has chilled him to his blood. He's seen her consorting with baboons, talking with them in grunting, guttural language. And they're not savaging her, they're not attacking her, they're not afraid of her, they're not mad at her. They're sort of just hanging out with her, and it horrifies him. And there's a scene, we see, I perspire from emotion, he said. I went into the jungle when I discovered your pony. I wanted to surprise you, but it was I who was surprised. I saw you in the trees with the baboons. Yes, she said, quite unemotionally, as though it was a matter of little moment that a young girl should be upon intimate terms with savage jungle beasts. It was horrible, ejaculated the Honorable Morrison. Horrible, repeated Miriam, puckering her brows in bewilderment. What was horrible about it? They are my friends. Is it horrible to talk to one's friends? You were really talking with them, then? Cried the Honorable Morrison. You understood them, and they understood you? Certainly. But they are hideous creatures, deranged beasts of a lower order. How could you speak the language of beasts? They are not hideous, and they are not deranged, replied Miriam. Friends are never that. I lived among them for years before Bwana found me and brought me here again. I scarce knew any other tongue than that of the Mangani. Should I refuse to know them now, simply because I happen, for the present, to live among humans? And of course that makes the Honorable Morrison Baines go nuts, saying, for the present? What do you mean? I think you might go back to them. But I love the way Burroughs treats her in this book. I liked it the last time I read this a little while ago, and I reread it with pleasure. Although, while I was rereading it, I realized a crisis, and one of you, in one of your comments yesterday, also pushed me towards realizing that crisis by expressing astonishment. One might even say ejaculating astonishment that I have almost no Tarzan currently. When I finished this book, I realized if I can find so much pleasure in rereading Son of Tarzan, I would imagine there's quite a bit of pleasure out there that I would get from rereading all of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I've read everything, but it was a long time ago. And I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, you don't really like mass market paperbacks anymore. You really want trade paperbacks or, nice science fiction book club hardcovers or something like that. And the thing about pulpy type fiction, like the type that Matt is celebrating with this read-a-thon, is that it won't exist in that form, almost certainly won't. And that I shouldn't be doctrinaire about it. So what I need to do is keep an eye out at charity shops, and especially at the Brattle Bookshop, for mass market paperbacks of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I need all of it. I don't care that I don't like mass market paperbacks. I still read them. And it's shocking how little I have. I have all of John Carter of Mars. I have that. And I have a couple of nice editions, too, because John Carter of Mars had an anniversary, and it was in the movie theaters. There was a movie that caused every single publisher under the sun, under the twin moons of Mars, to reprint all sorts of stuff from John Carter. So there was that. And also Marvel Comics, because they don't like to miss a bet, they brought out a big hardcover omnibus of their John Carter of Mars comic book. So I got to, when John Carter of Mars, the movie ended up being called John Carter. Who's that? I don't know. Imagine a movie theater, a movie studio, dumb enough to take the words of Mars out of a movie title because they thought it would work better without them, without the words of Mars. Anyway, because of all that, I got to enjoy those and have quite a bit of that. But novels 12 through 20 of Tarzan, no, no. And same thing with Conan too. There was recently a paperback reprint of Conan done with Cary Nord illustrations, and they were trade paperbacks. They're wonderful. They are the Conan volumes to have because they respect Robert E. Howard's original intent in writing the Conan stories, which was not to tell a beginning to end story. Rather, it was he was plunking down at different periods in Conan's long and multifaceted career in order to give us stories from those periods. And in the 1970s, L. Sprague de Camp sort of homogenized that and came out with a string of mass market paperbacks, Conan the Buccaneer, Conan of Aquilonia, that didn't reflect what Robert E. Howard did. They much more reflected a chronological sequence all the way from the very beginning stories when Conan is just a boy in the northern wastelands until he is king, an old king, which made for fascinating reading on its own. I'm sure I'm not the only person who back then read those books hungrily. But nevertheless, it's not what Robert E. Howard originally intended, and it's not, I found when I was reading those later paperbacks, it's not the best way either. The editors of those later paperbacks were right, and so was Robert E. Howard, that the more evocative way to read Conan is the way he originally envisioned it. But even so, I should have those old L. Sprague de Camp paperbacks, and I don't. I have all of John Carter of Mars in mass market paperback, but I have hardly any Tarzan. I don't have any Carson of Venus. It's crazy. I don't have any of the Pellucidar novels except the ones. No. I've learned my lesson, and I will rectify this. I've already cleared off a whole shelf that I will just fill with Edgar Rice Burroughs, an author who's brought me this much joy over this much time. I don't care if he's in mass market. I don't care if the mass markets are in terrible shape. I'll reinforce them. I'll read them lovingly. So I wanted to give you an update on that. But when I finished with The Son of Tarzan, I immediately, of course, went around Hyde Cottage looking for all the Edgar Rice Burroughs that I have. I have a nice, satisfying amount of John Carter of Mars, which is my favorite Edgar Rice Burroughs. You wouldn't think so. Since I myself was raised by a non-human species, you would assume that Tarzan would be my favorite. But no, the John Carter of Mars novels, I think, are incredible. I absolutely love them. And I have all of those. But I went around looking for all the other Tarzan or whatever that I might have. It's shockingly little. But one thing I did discover was this. I'd completely forgotten that I had it. Look at this. This is Bernie Hogarth, the great illustrator of Tarzan, Bernie Hogarth, writing in great detail the story of the beginning of the Tarzan story. So the mutiny on board the vessel carrying Lord and Lady Greystoke, and they're stranding in the jungle. Let me show you. There's a panel here. When they're in the jungle, see that off in the distance? There's a figure that looks almost human. But there's a panel where Bernie Hogarth just outdoes himself with showing us, look at that. The natural world. For those of you who maybe have never been to the jungles of Africa, I can assure you that leopards are not green. But it doesn't matter. Doesn't it work? It does. Look at that. How beautiful that is. And we get the story as it goes on. It's not the whole story of Tarzan of the Apes, but it is the beginning, where we have a young Tarzan whose best friends are apes, and he sees himself in the water and wonders why. See, his face here is inquisitive, and here, following in a sequence of where your eye will go, here his face is shocked. Because he is Gilak. He is smooth-skinned. He even tries at one point, this is a great detail from Tarzan of the Apes that people don't remember, he even tries at one point to smear his skin with mud and dirt so that it isn't so garishly white. But this book takes us all the way to the young manhood of Tarzan, where he finds his parents' old cabin, and he finds the books that are in there, and teaches himself how to read. It's actually a wonderful moment in Tarzan of the Apes, and here it gets the full treatment, where he teaches himself the alphabet. And this stops. This story stops right at Tarzan defeating Kerchak and taking control of this tribe of Mangani. So it doesn't lead on to his cousin threatening his birthright. It doesn't lead on to Jane Porter or anything like that. But how incredibly beautiful! Bernie Hogarth he's a great. He's an absolute great, and I had completely forgotten that I had this thing. So as a Tarzan celebration for this first week of Pentathon, which is Edgar Rice Burroughs, that did serve me pretty well. It not only did I enjoy rereading these things enormously, but also I was fired with new resolution, which is that the next time the temperature here in Boston goes below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I intend to go to the Brattle Bookshop and a bunch of other places and see what mass market Tarzan or what mass market Edgar Rice Burroughs is available. And then I'll just keep an eye out for it. So my Pentathon is off to a roaringly good start. and I thought I would give you this update. And next week is H.P. Lovecraft. I'll have to prepare myself between now and then, because you don't just read an author like that willy-nilly just roll out of bed and read him. You need to prepare yourself mentally for such heights. I'll report back at the time. Thank you, BookTube.